Hello, my friends. Today, let's start with what President Zelensky said. There is confirmed evidence that at least 150 Chinese military personnel are participating in combat operations on Russia's side, despite China's claims that they don't support this war.
The Security Service of Ukraine is already conducting initial legal actions with Chinese nationals who've been captured. They're in Kyiv, speaking with investigators, providing information about how they ended up on the front lines and became participants in this international crime, this Russian war against Ukraine. We also have details on other Chinese citizens within the Russian army, including their names, surnames, and exact routes they took to end up in the Russian occupation forces. Through diplomatic channels, we will pass this information along to the Chinese government. And of course, we'll make it clear to the whole world, especially to anyone who heard officials in Beijing say this war should not be escalated further or expanded. Involving Chinese citizens in this war is absolutely an escalation that demands a firm response. You can't be reinforcing the occupying army and talking about peace at the same time. Those things are mutually exclusive. We are also expecting our partners to stay firm in their support for Ukraine.
Overall, the Chinese are no different from the Russians. They say one thing and do another. Kaja Kallas also made a statement saying that the Russia don't want to end this war.
The Russian negotiation process. So, I mean, it takes two to want peace, but it only takes one to want war. And this is clearly what we see right now, that Russia wants war and continues with these attacks that are horrendous and more serious than ever, attacking children directly when, no military buildings or military organizations around by attacking this civilian population. So,
unfortunately, all of these statements don't change the situation. The war goes on. Now let's move on to the situation at the border. And the Ukrainian side has confirmed that Russian forces have advanced and regained control over the village of Huyeyevo. The confirmed advance was about 1 kilometer. They also moved a bit further through the fields near the village. Now they started moving toward the actual border. There are no populated settlements in this area, so there is a possibility the advance could happen quickly, although they still have about 4 kilometers to go on average. For now, we're waiting to see how things develop. In the Belgorod direction, the Ukrainian forces haven't launched any new attacks, while the Russians continue shelling the Sumy region. Over the past day, there haven't been any significant changes. In the Kharkiv direction, shelling continues without any offensive actions. Meanwhile, fighting has resumed in Vovchansk. There, Russian forces have begun actively using FPV drones against the frontline area. In addition, reports are coming in that the Russians are transferring part of their reserves from the Kursk direction to reinforce the offensive here. So the situation isn't getting any easier. However, over the past 24 hours, there haven't been any changes in the front line. Now let's move straight to the Pokrovsk direction. The Russians continue attacking Novo-Alexandrivka and are storming Udachne, Zvirove, Lysivka, and Yelizavetivka. Fighting also continues near the village of Shevchenko. According to confirmed information, the Ukrainian forces are launching counterattacks there, but for now there are no major shifts along the front line, and the fighting continues. At the same time, shelling of Pokrovsk is ongoing, and the city is being destroyed more and more with each passing day. It's important to note that the Ukrainian forces are also striking back at the Russians, and every day more video evidence is emerging showing that Ukrainian forces are destroying advancing Russian troops. In the Kurakhove direction, the Russians continue attacking Kotlerivka, pushing near Troitske, and storming Constantinople and Rozliv. Shelling of the rear areas also hasn't stopped, but over the past 24 hours, there have been no changes along the front line. For now, all attacks are being successfully repelled. However, the Russians are very focused on breaking through to the village of Bahatir and heavily shelling the area in preparation for new assaults. In the direction of Velika Novosilka, fighting continues near the village of Dniproenergia in Burlatsky, and the Russians are attempting to advance toward Vilna Pole. Shelling also continues here, but there have been no changes in the past day, and all attacks have been held. In the Zaporizhia direction, the Russians are storming Stepove and Lobkove in an attempt to fully capture the village. However, they haven't achieved any new successes so far, and the situation remains unchanged. In the Kherson direction, only shelling of the right bank is being recorded at the moment, with no new attacks by the Russians on the islands. The front line remains unchanged. In the Toretsk direction, the fighting continues for Leonidivka and Toretsk. As before, the Russians are unable to regain lost positions and continue increasing the number of meat assaults. However, they still have no success. To the south, they are storming Kalinova and conducting shelling, but over the past day there have been no advances. In the Chasiv Yar direction, the Russians continue their attacks in the central part of the city. They are also pushing towards Bila Hora, Delivka, and near Ozeryanivka. Despite their activity, they are unable to break through, and over the past day, the front line remains unchanged. In the Siversk direction, the Russians are storming Grigorivka, Bilogorivka, Verkhnyokamensky, and Vasyukivka. They carry out one assault per day on each village. However, they haven't had any success so far. In the Kremina direction, the Russians are pushing in the area of Katerinivka, storming Lipova, and Kolodezem. There have been no new advances from the Russians here so far. However, it's clear that they have created a small wedge towards the village of Ritkudub and are continuing to develop their success. According to the Ukrainian armed forces from the area, the situation is described as follows. The front line has become very difficult since the Russians took positions in Katerinivka. They have started rapidly advancing towards the village of Nove. Currently, we managed to destroy them in the eastern areas, but assaults continue both day and night. The Russians are also showing activity to the east of the village of Zelena Dolina. We should expect new movements from the Russians here too. In the Borova direction, the Russians continue their attacks on Boguslavka, but there is no significant activity elsewhere. They haven't been able to break through the fields beyond Lozova. To the south, they had more success, and after advancing further, they are attempting to take control of Rakivka. However, there have been no changes here in the last 24 hours. The Ukrainian forces continue to repel all attacks. In the Kupiansk direction, there are combat clashes only in the area of Stepova-Novoselivka, but as before, there have been no changes. Meanwhile, Trump has started backpedaling. Recently, in response to journalists' questions, he said he wasn't ready to make a pause or remove new tariffs, but today he made a new statement saying that he is willing to take a 90-day break to hold negotiations. Due to the disrespect China is showing toward the global markets, I am raising the tariffs imposed by the United States on China to 125%, which will take effect immediately. At some point, I hope in the near future, China will realize that exploiting the US and other countries is no longer acceptable. And on the contrary, based on the fact that over 75 countries have contacted US representatives, including the Departments of Commerce, Treasury, and the US Trade Representative, requesting negotiations to resolve trade related issues, including trade barriers, tariffs, currency manipulation, and non cash tariffs, and that these countries haven't taken measures against the United States. I have approved a 90-day pause and a substantial reduction in mutual tariffs during this period to 10%, which will also take effect immediately. As we can see, Trump is sharply changing his plans. In general, the circus continues. This is rather how he also stopped the war in 24 hours. That's all from me. So please, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.